Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm here today with Jen. We met when I put a call out on Blue Sky. This is the first time we've actually spoken to each other, but Jen kindly responded and agreed to do an interview. And so here we are. You're about to find out about Jen at the same time as me. Jen, over to you. Nice to meet
Oh,
you.
thank you so much.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you. Oh, thank you so much, Alex. So nice to meet you. I'm glad we connected on Blue Sky. So my name's Jen DeHaan. I am located in Canada. I live off the West Coast on Vancouver Island, which is a giant island. And it's where I grew up as well. My artistic background is I actually started off in the arts. I was drawing. I went to and got a BFA in sort of adult education in the arts, but I was allowed to take anything. So I did a lot of painting, a lot of drawing, all that kind of thing. And then I went to Vancouver Film School and did digital art because I really got into using computers to do art in the 90s. So I went to Vancouver Film School, finished that up, ended up in tech and did graphic design, video, audio, all that sort of thing. Basically, the Adobe Creative Suite. I worked on it, worked on all those different products. Left, got into sewing. I got into performance. I did dance fitness. I did vaudeville. So really got into the creative performance stuff. And I've continued that in a digital sense, doing comedy and improv and that sort of thing. And I'm continuing to sort of merge all those things, the tech stuff and the performance comedy stuff together and writing and so on. And that's what I do now.
That's amazing. So you come from a well, you've done a bit of everything by the sound of it, but I guess more generally performance art, but comedy, improv. All the interviews I've done so far
Mhm.
with visual artists, so I was really keen
Yeah.
to have someone on representing something different, and I didn't have anything in mind for that, but improv was not anywhere near the front of my mind, so I was actually quite
It's not
pleased
in the front of
when you
many
told me.
people's minds.
Well, exactly. So interesting. So, do you want to tell us what you mean by improv? I mean, I know I've watched Whose Line Is It Anyway, and I
Mhm.
know about improv from jazz improv, and I improv on the guitar a bit and so on. But do you want to tell us what it is from your perspective?
Absolutely. So, improv comedy. I mean, you can do it in a lot of different spaces. So, whose line is a lot of people's my entry point to improv. I guess in the '80s, probably. I started with the UK version, and so that's one example of improv. It's sort of improv games. It's often referred to as short form. Sort of another theater sports is another sort of format of that. So there's that short form game. The style that I do is called long form. So it's more, it can be serious dramatic, it can be comedic. And you're basically putting together a whole story as a collection of scenes. So it's a lot more, it's scenic in nature as opposed to game form. So improv, you're sort of, you're obviously you're improvising, you're speaking off the cuff, you're listening. Active listening is a big part of it. You're listening to your scene partners. They're giving you what we call offers. They offer something and we build upon that offer, add to the story and make sort of a scene or a story together. So it's very much a team sport in a lot of aspects. However, you can also do it on your own. I do a lot of solo improv on my own, and that can be audio podcasts. It can be short web videos. So there's a lot of flexibility in what improv can actually be. Sort of, and that's the creative art aspect that I guess I love about it.
Yeah, I love that, and I think I don't I do a fair amount of sort of artwork that I don't. Well, I don't plan a lot of my artwork actually,
Mhm.
and funnily enough, the way you talk about it, I guess I'm improving. I certainly
Mhm.
improv guitar because I just cannot be bothered to learn anything. So I just pick up
Yeah.
my guitar and start whittling away. So are you doing this in front of an audience?
I'm not doing it on stage, live on stage, right now. I'm isolated. Basically I have a parent that I caregive for, so I don't really go out in big groups anymore because I'm sort of keeping them safe from germs and all that kind of thing. So I'm doing everything digitally, everything online at this time. So podcasts, web videos, that sort of thing.
So you're doing things online with other people.
Yes. Yeah, that's where I started doing my improv. I started doing stage performance prior to becoming a fully digital entity, I guess. But I started learning improv online with groups of other people, and we use Zoom, and we turn on and off our camera and that kind of thing. And I've sort of moved more into the podcast sense, so doing a lot of audio improv, which there's quite a significant history of that through shows like Comedy Bang Bang is a large scale example of podcast based improvisation.
I haven't heard of that. I will check it out.
Yeah.
So when you start an improv session, presumably some sort of direction.
Yeah, so improv, even though we're just sort of making it up as we go, has a lot of, I guess, guardrails or rules associated with it. So when I started off just going to free online jams, which is just where we get together. I started off doing the whose line is it anyways style of improv, where we just do short games. You can drop in, you can have never done improv before. They'll teach you the game in the moment. Say these are the guidelines, these are the rules of the game, kind of like they do on Who's Line, and you just go ahead and you try it out and you just see what happens. So that was my first point. But then I got into it. I really enjoyed it, so I wanted to learn how to do it. So I started taking classes. There's classes you can take online where they step through and say, what is yes and what is an offer? What do you do when someone offers you a thing? What do you do with it? And how do you add to a scene? And what is a scene structure kind of like? And what's a game like? How do you figure out what the game is? All those things you learn in improv schools. So I went to improv school for a while. I learned that. And then you can drop into these uh, jams. You can know a little bit more. You can start improvising with teams. We all know the sort of the same language. And you can start making sort of shows and stuff like that. So that's one way. You can just go into the jams, not know anything, kind of learn and play along, or you can learn sort of the structure and rules around it and do more basically.
Can you give me an example of a scenario that you would use to start an improv?
Sure. So there's an initiation. So when you're starting off a scene, and I'm talking more about the long form, scenic form of improv, not sort of whose line. But what you do at the beginning of the scene is you take a suggestion. So somebody gives you a Douglas fir tree. I just looked out my window, Douglas fir tree, and then that will inspire you. You don't have to make the scene about a Douglas fir tree, but that's going to be your inspiration for the scene. So what does that tree make you think of? Oh, that tree makes me think of living in the forest. Maybe I live in a bunker or something. So maybe the scene is set in a bunker inside the forest. And so then you give an initiation to your scene partner. And I'd be like, oh, this bunker is, looking a little bit dirty, or it could just be like, oh, it's a nice morning to drink a cup of coffee outside the bunker, whatever it is. You're just sort of initiating to the scene partner. So it might show them a bit how you got to that word that you're given, and then they'll just sort of start adding to the scene, and you build that initiation into what's called a base reality. You're sort of learning what the who, the what, and the where is, and you're doing that at the top of the scene. So you're just kind of forming that idea of a world, right? And then after you sort of know who you are, what you're doing, that kind of thing. What's your relationship maybe to each other? Maybe we're a brother and a sister outside our bunker early in the morning, whatever. And then you're going to look for what's that kind of interesting part of the scene. What's coming up that's just kind of interesting about this scene? And that might form into what's called the game of the scene. This is one type of improv that I do specifically. There's many other types, but we're finding out what can we play with that will make it interesting to an audience. So then we'll work together to make that game and do what's called heightening that game. So then we're going to make that game more and more interesting, hopefully more funny if we're doing our job right. And then we'll get to the point of the scene, something big happens, and then the scene will be done. Or we'll continue on in another related scene and build it into a set of scenes that make a full sort of show or story.
And so, how long does a show stroke story go on for?
A typical scene, there's many different forms, but the kind of that I've done the most of, a scene might be 2 or 3 minutes, sort of an average. They can go longer or even be really short, but sort of an average scene is about 2.5 minutes, and you might have a collection of those. Shows can range from 20 minutes to a full hour or even sometimes longer. But yeah, there's a range in there. But usually when you have a show, you'll have an idea about how long is this show going to be. Is it 20 minutes? Is it 45? And your form will probably adjust for that, whatever you've chosen.
That's amazing. It blows my mind that you can do this. Although I guess all the while you're talking, I'm sort of thinking about it, going, "Well, I guess I'm improvising right now, aren't I?" So
You
I did,
are, yeah.
yeah. As we agreed before when we were talking before this, like I just wing it, right, at these
Yep.
interviews, and so I am improvising. So I guess I do understand. I
Yeah.
think, and I think one thing that I find with doing that, and we'll talk a little about neurodiversity in a little while, but I'm ADHD, so I
Mhm.
don't do planning really,
Yeah.
which is one of the main reasons I turn up and wing these things, because I can and I don't like planning. And but it's quite a high cognitive load while you're doing it. Do you find that? Do you find it quite exhausting? Because my guess is you have to be running high CPU for the whole time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So that's sort of the amazing thing I find about performance in general. So before improv, I was doing dance fitness, which was a very similar cognitive feel. When I made that connection of my brain, my CPU power feels the same as this thing because I love teaching dance fitness. That was just my joy, my passion in life. When I made that connection that my brain was doing that sort of that cognitive load that was the same, it was just sort of it was it did a lot for me because what happens when you're learning these things? When you're starting off and you're learning dance fitness, instruction versus or improv or whatever it is that has that kind of structure, those sort of rules around it, it is a lot. It's exhausting. You have to you're thinking about things in like a rapid succession. However, that's wonderful because I'm ADHD autistic, and I loved that feeling, that rapid, like making decisions and stuff. But there's still the structure and the rules around it, right? So you're learning how to do these things like, well, base reality. Okay, we're about here in the scene. It's a lot. It's heavy. It's very stressful. Very like you get out of a class or anything, and you're just like, I need to go take a nap. Like that was a lot. But what happens is you eventually get to the point in all these things where you're running on autopilot. So you've got all these rapid things coming in from you, either your scene partners on a stage in an improv scene or from the people taking your dance fitness class because you're watching all of them and trying to accommodate for that same kind of thing. They're like your scene partners in an improv scene if you're teaching them how to do dance fitness class or whatever. And so you're taking all these things in, it becomes autopilot. You know, okay, that's that. I adjust immediately. And your brain just has this sort of autopilot thing going on, and you just know how to react by your gut. So what happens eventually is you don't need to think about all those things anymore. You'll just react naturally, and all you have to think about is doing what you're doing right immediately in the moment. And your brain will take care of a lot of that. So eventually you do get to the point in improv where you aren't in your head. That's sort of the phrase that we use. Are you in your head? And that's all that thinking. I don't want to be in my head. I want to let go. And eventually you do get to that point where you let go and you just take things in and almost react from your gut.
Well,
It's hard to
it's
explain.
it's like driving a car, right? When you first
Mhm.
learn to
Yeah.
drive, it's like I've got all these things. I've got a gear stick on, what are all these buttons? And then like nowadays, I'm just like, you just tune out, don't you? I didn't even
You
notice I
do.
was driving. How did I get here?
Yeah.
So
Did I stop at that stop sign? Oh no.
yeah, exactly. Where did this hamburger come from?
Yeah, exactly.
What? So the neurodiversity thing was really interesting the way you described this. We're both ADHD plus
Mhm.
autism. And one of the reasons I sort of realized latterly that the type of art that I do suits me is because my ADHD brain needs novelty, and I
Mm,
tend to cycle. I'm not one of these people that spends ages on the same piece. I've always got 5, 6, 7 things on the go at the
yeah.
same time, so I can always get. There's always new things to do. But
Mhm.
so it pleases my ADHD brain, but it pleases my autistic brain because I go to my studio at certain times. Things are where they're
Yeah.
supposed to be. People leave me alone. I can structure myself around the things that I'm doing or the time that I'm taking. I know when I do start it. I know when I'm supposed to finish it, and it sits within a framework that keeps my autistic brain happy.
Yes.
And as you were talking about that, then this idea that um, the whole thing around improv is novelty.
Mhm.
But you talk then a lot about the structure, and it really struck me. Is it's like you were describing the same thing as me. Is you do this because it pleases both parts of your brain.
Yes. Oh, it absolutely does. And I think that was a lot of the stress in dance fitness, for example, when I started that, because it is very when you're on stage, you're yelling in a microphone at people. You're getting that novelty all the time. You have people doing unexpected stuff that you get to react to, and it's wonderful. But I realized, and I loved it. But I realized I'm so stressed out for a while. I didn't really understand that. And what I was stressed out about was my potential lack of structure around the class itself, because I was teaching, we're all sort of independent, we make our classes ourselves, so that those rules and that structure, a lot of it for outside of actually teaching the 1 hour that you teach, can be chaotic until you structure it. And I once I learned I could have my structure and I could do what I needed to do in that stuff before class and kind of control that in a way. I had a very specific way. I had all my little uh, satchels of stuff that I would take, and I'd have boxes, and the boxes needed to be the right way. And I needed to set everything up in the same order, in the same, like everything before class. People would offer to help me, and I'm like, no, please don't. There's a way. Right. And once I honored that and I said, well, if I do that way, that alleviates most of the stress. Most of my stress is outside of the actual teaching, not the teaching itself, and recognize that's where it's coming from helped me immensely. So even when you don't, you can do what you need, including improv. You're on a team, you're working with other people. Once you figure out where is this anxiety or stress or anything coming from, for most people, it's the actual performance, but for other people like myself, it's not the performance that's causing the stress, it's the other stuff around the performance that's causing the stress. So sort of being very self-aware of what you need to put in place to help with that, can be very important in whatever you
Yeah,
do.
no, I couldn't agree more. And it sounds a bit paradoxical to some people, especially given
Yeah.
the general um, I don't want to say cliche, but the general behavior that people expect around autism is introversion. I'm exhausted by people, but I come
Mhm.
across as very sociable, and I'm quite happy
Yeah.
to stand up in front of a large audience and just bullshit around.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah,
say stuff.
exactly.
Whatever comes
Yeah.
into my mind, and that's why I do a podcast because half the time I just get to monologue and no one interrupts me, but because I'm in control
Yes,
of that environment, right? And
exactly. Yeah.
but it's all the stuff around it. Like if I've got to go and do like a speech somewhere or something, what stresses me out was that no one gave me the proper directions to the place I was supposed to be going. They didn't tell me what
Mhm.
was going to happen when I got there, and then something wasn't what they told me it was going to be, and blah blah blah. And by the time I get there, I'm sort of a bit of a gibbering wreck, and then you push me out on stage, and I'm like Elvis Presley, and it's like people are like, "What the hell is going on here?"
What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
nuts. So how do you how do you square that off? This idea of the dichotomy of all of this and the idea of performance and being the center of attention. Because I listened to that episode on your podcast about neurodiversity and comedy. What was it about? I want to say being seen, but that's not how you put it.
Yeah, being perceived,
Perceived.
the
That was it.
concept,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, that for me was it was really validating.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah, it's such an unusual concept because it's, and I think possibly sort of related to what we've been speaking about might kind of illustrate just this very sort of unusual concept of where we are feeling uncomfortable being perceived. But I participated in a vaudeville like performance where we did sort of sketches in 1920s style, local community theater, but it was a fun show. Large cast of 50, very chaotic. And most people, at least it seemed in this performance, were very nervous about going out onto the stage to do their scenes, their sketches, and I was completely nervous prior to going on stage. But because of the social nature of it, we'd all be behind stage, waiting to go out, and I'd be standing there silent because I kind of need that silence control. I don't want any of the social stuff. The social was what was making me absolutely feel the anxiety of talking, small talking behind the stage. And I just wanted to get out onto the stage to do like what you were saying. That's where I was comfortable because there's the rule, there's some structure in the chaos, I guess. There's what we know how we're being perceived. We know we're being watched by the audience. We know that we're going out there to perform. We know what our job is. Whereas behind the scene, I don't know what my job is. I don't know what's expected of me on that social waiting. Everybody else is nervous to go out there. I'm anxious to get out there. Like I want to
Yeah.
go out there. And I think it's that sort of, we don't know what's expected of us. We don't know how we're being interpreted by others. I'm standing there silent. I'm wondering, are they thinking something's wrong with me? Because a lot of times when I'm in a group and I'm quiet, people are like, are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm just listening. Like, don't bring the attention on me. That's
Mhm.
making me anxious, right? Like, so I think just knowing what to anticipate, knowing how we're going to control how we're being perceived, we know what the audience wants. That's comforting. And I think maybe that's sort of where that perception is a lot easier for us potentially than being perceived in sort of the chaotic social structures that we have to participate in
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. I mean, if I'm up there monologuing, oh Jesus, if you give me any chance to monologue, I will. Come
Mm.
and ask me about one of my, whatever my current special interest is, and you're going to lose 20 minutes minimum.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I do that to one person, I do it to 100 people. I don't really care. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure if they're bored, they'll make it pretty well known. But it's a captive audience. I'm like, when else do I get to just stand here and say whatever's on my mind, and you have to
Yeah.
listen? I mean,
Yeah, and they
it's
they
great.
want this?
Yeah,
They want
great.
this? Oh.
Yeah, but I
Best
mean,
feeling.
I'm very aware of other people who are more just on the autism spectrum. Just find that whole concept absolutely terrifying, and
Mhm,
and so the idea of something like improv is anathema to a lot of people, I think. Do you get all sorts doing this? I mean,
mhm.
is there a type?
I would say the types might organize themselves slightly by improv style. There's a bunch of different styles, ones that are less structured and ones that are more structured, and also style of comedy. So I ended up being very attracted to the style of comedy that I kind of grew up with. I loved what is called alt comedy. It's just like Kids in the Hall. I'm Canadian. Kids in the Hall would be an example of that. I grew up with that. I loved it. But there's all sorts of other shows that are sort of in that sort of alt comedy sense. That was what I was watching a lot of, and that's what I liked doing when I was in art school, getting my BFA. I put up sort of what one of the teachers called performance art. I didn't say who I was, and I put up all these posters. Jen needs a friend, and put all these little things on that people could tear off. I'm lonely. I need a friend, and it's sort of
Wow.
blurring the lines of what's real, what's not. Like that's the sort of subversive comedy, that kind of thing. That's what I liked. Anyways, that's where I sort of ended up in the improv sense. And I think a lot of other people that like that sort of style of comedy, I find a lot of them in the type of improv that I'm doing. A lot of what might be other neurodivergent people sort of attracted to this style. A lot of rules, It's very structured in how you structure a scene for the improv style of this. And I think it sort of attracted people like me. But in improv in general, there's all sorts. There's extrovert, absolutely the most neurotypical type people improvising with autistic ADHD me, right? Like, so it does attract a lot of types, but I'd say probably a slightly higher percentage of people who like structure, at least, or like a kind of a lot of rules in their improv, might be attracted to the style I do.
So obviously there's two halves to this podcast. There's the art and creativity side, and there's the mental health side. And it's surprising the amount of people who the creative and artistic side is or at least started out almost exclusively about managing mental health. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that you're a carer, and I can imagine that comes with some serious challenges.
Mhm.
And I note from your bio that you've had a few challenges in the past. And so, do you want to tell us a little about that and how you think that your artistic and creative side has helped that?
I think it has a lot. Like, I would consider myself dysthymic, so like low level depression for a long period of time. And um I from a very early age would lose myself in drawing. Some of my earliest sort of memories of where it was helpful on a mental health standpoint, we used to go on vacation to the Oregon coast, and I would lock myself away in this room that we got in this little sort of vacation rental type place in front of a window with my Sony Walkman headphones on, drawing. Like, and that was just my idea of happiness, alone, locked in a room, drawing, looking out a window at the beach, right? Like, and that would calm me after this incredibly stressful drive to get there, right? So I sort of associated drawing with calmness and mental health and benefits from a very early age, which is probably why I ended up going to art school because it was sort of what I knew. And I found a lot of other people doing the same. They would go find their corners alone with their headphones and doing their art, or alone, people that like to sort of roll solo, I guess. Which is why I made the joking posters. Jen needs a friend, right? And put them around. Uh, so I think from an early age it did, and that's probably why I ended up in the creativity. It also, I think, for not feeling seen, not feeling like I really have a voice, and I'm very introverted outside of the performance side as well, very, insular, private type person. The creative stuff gives you a voice without needing to say, this is me, this is Jen saying this. I can say it as a character, I can say it through the art, and just anything that would kind of give me a voice without having to point at myself. This is what Jen thinks, which is why my podcast and stuff about it has been one of the most challenging things I've done, to say this is me talking as me. Very difficult, because I've always sort of hidden behind the art or the characters or stuff, which has given me a little bit of sense of peace and being able to say something. But also, I'd say, like, through that, one of the podcasts I'm writing right now, it's sort of a combination of scripted and improv, is all about mental health. That's the whole theme of the show. Hitting rock bottom, hitting depression, getting out of depression, and what sort of some of these things that you can try, but told through comedy, sort of a mix of comedy and not. And that, I think, being able to give the art, giving you those creative outlets of sort of having a voice through the story, through the characters, is very, it's helpful. I think.
Do you find that whatever is causing you that psychological friction at any given point in time when perhaps you're having a low, does it actually come out in recognizable ways, or do any of the themes come out when you're improvising, or are you feeling angry about something that's happened? Are you angry in the improv?
I think you can, through the character, some of that will show up. One of the phrases that we use quite often in the improv community is, improv is not therapy. So improv can be therapeutic. But we're not using the scene for therapy. Like, that's the part we want to avoid. but we can absolutely use the feelings that are in there. I don't think we can really avoid them to a certain extent. If you are feeling this underlying anger, you might be sort of releasing a little of that through the character. So as long as we aren't, going and turning our scene partner into somebody that is representative of someone in our actual lives, as long as we're not really doing that and we're just sort of working with this overall sort of state that we're in that's not really damaging or harming the scene for others, then I think that's not, I don't wouldn't really know how to avoid that too much, because that's honest, it's real, it's what's there.
Yeah, and I've said this a few times on this podcast that you're there all over your work, right? Because it's you that's
Yeah.
doing it, and and even if you don't see that that it's coming out and it's there, other people will. And I agree with you. I don't think you can stop it, and I don't even
Yeah.
try. And I
Yeah.
think I think my guess is there's a lot of parallels between me being hyper focused in front of an easel, for example, and you doing some performance. In that, what one of the hallmarks is I'm not thinking about the things that are
Yeah.
bothering me,
Yeah.
and they're very mindful. But that doesn't mean to say they're not there. I think my work reads a lot like a diary. If I put everything on a long line, I'd certainly be able to see a story there. So I don't
Yeah.
can avoid it.
I don't think you can either. It just comes out. It's surprising. Like in the writing in this podcast series that I'm doing right now, it's like, oh, it's not intentional. But then you read it back after, you're kind of editing it. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see some parallels to my own life here. Yeah.
We're heroes of our own story, or the villains,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Oh, that
So
too. Yeah.
I know that my future me hates me now, right?
Yeah.
At any given
Oh,
point in
for
time,
sure.
because
For
past me is a
sure.
total asshole. You know what I mean?
Oh, oh, I absolutely know what you mean. It's just like, oh, why did you do that? Like
Yeah,
that was not recommended.
yeah.
Now we got to deal
Um,
with it today. Ugh.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because I couldn't be asked to deal with it 2 days ago when it really needed to be done. Uh,
Yeah.
I hate past me. He is the villain of my story. And so you said you're a carer. Tell us as much or little about that as you like, but that's clearly a big part of your life.
It is, yeah. So I live on a property that has two houses on it. I'm very lucky. My mom lives in the other house, so help her out quite a bit with health, just what she needs, because her health is a concern. So and we've had some stuff that's been going on. So just help her out on a day-to-day basis with what she needs, and it very, very lucky to be so close by, that she lives basically 30 feet from my back door. So,
Good. So you get on well then.
yes, yeah, yeah, we're very, very lucky to get along, and just I mean, we help each other out too, because I get to go visit her at a different house, and it's quite nice to be able to walk out the
Yeah.
door and go to somebody else's house so easily. So.
Yes, and you've got a lot of space out there in Canada.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm lucky. I'm on 10 acres of forested land, so get to walk around a forest a lot and have space from that's quiet, which is quite nice.
Do you find that because I live in Scotland, I used to live in southeast of England, which is one of the most densely populated
Yeah.
parts of probably the world, but certainly of the UK. And I moved up to Scotland because there's far fewer people up here, and I have
Mhm.
mountains and trees and stuff. And you know, once I'd got here, I didn't. I thought I sort of thought I needed some isolation. I needed a break from being constantly surrounded by people. And once I got here, I think I realized just how much I needed that. And
Yeah.
it's so easy to find places to shelter around here.
Yes. Yeah, that was, I lived in cities for most of my adult life. Grew up sort of subdivision, but then moved out in my 20s. So spent about 20 years San Francisco Bay Area and a couple different spots there and Toronto, Calgary, etc. And always lived in townhouses or apartments, of course, as you do oftentimes in the cities. And then so this is the first time that I have ever lived in a single family dwelling, I guess, have four walls around you without adjoining neighbors, and it's so quiet. And
Yeah,
when I first moved out here, I was just, it almost scared me. And I mean, I loved it and I love it now, but it was very unsettling not having so many voices around. But then I quickly got used to that and I love it. So very,
yeah,
very fortunate.
couldn't agree more. So
Mhm.
back to the improv. Would you recommend anyone try this? And what do you think the sort of the key benefits are?
Oh, great question. I never thought I would enjoy performance. So my first performance was as a dance fitness instructor. You're going up on a stage with a microphone and stuff. It's similar in a lot of ways, like that way, the way your brain works. And when I started it, first of all, I kind of ended up doing it by accident, performing by accident. Some friends invited me to go along and help them. They didn't speak English; was their second language, and they wanted me to help them a bit with some of the translations and so on. So I went to support them, and I ended up a teacher at the end of it. So they're like, "You should do this. You should do this." But it terrified me. It terrified me going up in front of a group. I was shaking, but then as soon as I got up there, it was just like this relief and comfort. And I was like, what, how did that happen? Okay. And I kept going, but it's a struggle to start. It's hard for everybody, no matter what kind of neurotype you are, introvert, extrovert. One of my friends in that community was one of the most extroverted people person people. And she was just as anxious as I was, but in other ways. So for everybody, it's difficult. It's a huge, it's a difficult thing to start going up on stage and performing. But it's it has brought some of the greatest joy in my life doing it, and it is mental health. It just helped to balance me like nothing else. So it's worth trying. It's worth sort of giving it some time to get over that hump. It took me a few months to feel comfortable going in front of the group and teaching, because it takes that long to kind of get things a little bit more automated so you're not completely in your head thinking. But it's worth it because it can lead to something that you love. It might not, and then you can let it go and go try something else. But anything that you're learning is a hard new skill. Improv has the similarities. It took a long time for me to learn the rules and learn all those guardrails and have it become sort of more of an automated thing. I'm not stressing and thinking about. And that automation, that's sort of the way that your brain operates when you can kind of let go and just have fun. It's absolutely a balancing, helpful thing. It gets rid of that stress. You get to escape from your thing. That's why, hyper focus can be so wonderful. It's kind of that same hyper focus feeling in a lot of ways. And that is a mentally balancing thing to have happen. You can also, of course, meet people that are kind of like minded, and that can be very helpful as well. Yeah, and like we are kind of maybe feeling some of those feelings that we need to feel to help sort of process things. And even though it's not therapy, you're not treating it like therapy, it can be therapeutic in that nature of sort of helping you process some things. Maybe after the scene, you're going, huh, maybe I should think about that thing a little bit more. Maybe something a little bit came up in the scene that you're like, maybe I need to process that. So yeah, there's so many benefits. It's going to be different for everybody, sort of how it works out and what stresses you need to sort of resolve in the beginning to get over that hump.
I can really relate to that, and especially with the whole alexithymia thing. For those who are not aware, who are
Yes.
listening, alexithymia is I think anyone can have it really, but it's very common in autistic people where you don't recognize your own emotions. You don't recognize that they're happening. So
Yeah.
you might be really, really, really stressed, but just not notice it. You might be really, really, really
Yeah.
hungry and just not notice it, and then suddenly, bam, out of nowhere, like, wow, why am I so stressed? How did I go
Yeah.
from being perfectly fine to being literally steam coming out the ears? And it took me years to recognize that this was going on with me. And people, I
Yeah.
was a surprise to everyone else when, like, Alex, 2 minutes ago you were fine, and now you are losing your shit. What the hell
Yeah.
happened? And I'm like, I don't know. It was because I was stressed. I just hadn't noticed.
Oh
I'm
my
getting better
gosh,
at that
yeah.
now. So I can
Yeah.
really imagine it just comes out, right? And, maybe, do you think it helped you label those emotions, and so that after a while you sort of see it and you act it out, and then when it happens again, IRL, that you're like, oh, that's what that one is. You know what I mean? Yeah, and help you
Yeah.
recognize the emotions when they pop up.
I don't think it really helped me label them. And the reason I say that is we do have a lot of exercises in improv where a labeled emotion will be given to you. I also have alexithymia. And so labeling those emotions even well after the fact. I couldn't do I didn't really know why I couldn't do those exercises. I also didn't realize that I had alexithymia at all until I got into improv and had no idea what is that really? Like how and I'd have to sort of jump back to previous memories that I had processed to kind of get an idea of how to even handle that in the scene. But I figured out my own way to sort of handle that sort of thing and how to I don't need to label it. I can just do a rough approximation and what that means to me, right? Like that will still work. But I haven't really noticed being able to label them better. I think it's just I've had to kind of shift how I do the improv to handle some of those things and recognizing it after. I think I'm still going more by the feeling than an actual word label. But there even if you do have it's completely I should say you can still do improv. You figure out your own way. And one of my favorite scenes was I knew the other person in the scene quite well. I knew that they had alexithymia as well, and we were doing an emotion scene where we're each given the label. And so I made some little comment, just kind of knowing my scene partner, and my scene partner picked up on what I meant because it was the actual exercise. And we made the whole scene about alexithymia without using the word alexithymia, but we knew what we were talking about. And it gave me so much joy. I felt so seen. And we just laughed after that. And the teacher's like, what's going on? I don't know what that's all about. But yeah, you can still make these things work. But yeah, I haven't really on the labeling thing. I don't think I've noticed much of a shift for me, unfortunately.
But in general, do you feel like your experience, through these various types of performance, do you think it's changed you, or do you think that you, you've just brought out something that was naturally there underneath?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I think something naturally has been there because I've done a lot of alt comedy things that I hadn't realized even were comedy. Even when I was doing dance fitness, I didn't even recognize it as acting or performance. A friend of mine said, "Oh, but you are performing. You are an actor." I'm like, "No, I'm not. What are you talking about?" And it turns out, okay, yeah, now I see. My friend was right. But so I think it is something that was brought out that I didn't know that I could kind of almost in a sense label. Okay, this is perform, and that was comedy, that was alt comedy, this thing that I was doing just as myself in real life, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. I've been dancing around. I haven't been dancing around. Two things I don't do. One is dancing, and the other one is
Hmm.
acting. Right.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, and I think the dancing one particularly, even if you go into a nightclub, no one's paying attention to anyone
Yeah.
apart from people trying to hit on each other, and just being seen
Hmm.
dancing. I just feel
Yeah.
like such a like so like one giant like embarrassment, like really worrying what people are going to think of me. So I have to be off my head, drunk massively. At which point I can't dance at all.
Yeah.
So I don't dance.
Yeah.
And I'm like 50, so I don't go to nightclubs either. There's a drama group locally. I'm sort of peripherally involved with simply because they're part of the same wider arts group, and they perform next door to me. So I've been toying with joining them because, and actually, there's some of the stuff you've been saying. I think I've always thought, well, I can't act, right? I'm
Yeah.
so bad at it,
Yeah.
and the more I sort of think about it and hear what you've said, I'm like, well, actually, I don't know if I would be a good actor. I think I can probably be a lot better, and I think I do a lot more than I think, especially when I think about autism and masking. Well, I'm acting all the
Yeah.
time, right?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
I have to act like a normal human being almost 24 hours a day. So I should be able to act like, other types of human being.
Yeah.
So maybe I should take up something.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the acting is just sort of finding parts of yourself that you're accentuating, and you don't have to. First of all, like in improv, you don't want to try to be funny at all. Like you're not trying to be funny. You're sort of starting from a very grounded, sort of natural place in a lot of these and finding the funny. A lot of people play it super close to their chest, like they're like themselves almost all the time, and they're finding the humor through a point of view, which we all have our point of views. So that's where you're finding it. You aren't being this big character. But like you said, like my friend, like when she said, "Oh, but you're performing, you are acting." I had no idea I was. So that's a big thing that we learned sort of getting into this, is that there's many, many different ways to approach it. And you might find that you like doing voices and big characters after. You never know what's going to come out sometimes.
Well, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
and I guess the other reason why I wouldn't mind doing it is because I think it would be great for my podcasting,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm finding my feet with this stuff, and I feel like there's progression, but I can imagine doing either improv or acting or anything would really sort of help me.
Mhm.
So
Oh, for
I'm
sure, yeah.
super up for it. But I'm going to bring this to a close because what's going to happen is I'm
Right?
just going to sit here getting advice from you for another hour, and everyone else is going to switch off. So I should
That's
probably,
right.
I should probably not, and you probably try and charge me for it. So I
No.
won't do that.
No, I love talking about that. That's the thing. I could info dump for another 3 hours if you want.
Maybe we should, maybe because I have so many questions, but we shouldn't. So I'm going to draw this one to a close. Do you want to just tell us about your little podcast empire?
The teeniest, tiniest empire you've ever seen. Yeah, so I release my podcast on what's called Stereo Forest. So it's at stereoforest.com, Blue Sky, YouTube, same name. And then I do sort of my own videos, sort of side videos and stuff on Pensive Antics, Blue Sky, YouTube.
Anywhere else we can find you, or any what are your plans? Anything else you want to tell everyone about? Stuff you're doing coming up?
Sure. Yeah, I'm working on another couple new podcasts that haven't come out yet. So they're very improv based, but within a structure. So a very structured show, but I'm improvising within it with other people. And then I'm just going to keep going on making audio dramas that are mostly scripted, but also include improvised elements within them. So those will all be at least linked on Stereo Forest. I'm not too sure exactly where they'll end up elsewhere. But
So I'll stick a link for Stereo Forest in the show notes,
well,
and
thank you.
basically go there to find anything else about you.
Yeah, amazing.
Amazing. And it's a great website, actually. It looks really good, but that's your other job, right? Making websites and stuff, right?
Yeah, that's what I started with in the 90s with all that tech stuff, was doing all the web design and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, me too. But then I stopped doing it, and now I seem to find my whole. My life seems to be I'm a content creator, right?
Nice.
Who knew that's what I would end up doing?
Yeah.
But well, why not?
I never
Got
thought
to do
I'd put
something.
my face on the internet. I started with video early on, and then I never until improv thought that I'd actually put my face on video on the internet, but here we
I
are.
know, and it's quite daunting. And then you do it,
Mhm.
and now you can't get enough of it.
You
So I
can't
record any old crap these days and stick it on
um,
YouTube. Why
Yep.
not?
Oh, it's fun.
Right. Well, maybe we'll try this again at some
I would
point
love
because
to.
I feel like there's a ton of stuff we can drill down on here.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe like you, I'll have a little podcast empire because I keep on coming. I've got another, I'm starting another new podcast, and I was walking around today. I had another idea for a new podcast. And it's literally
Yes.
like, Alex, no, 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 you can't do more of these. Um,
I do the
so
same. I've got a list of ideas, and I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna
yeah.
be busy."
Yeah, welcome to ADHD, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for
Oh, me
joining
too.
me,
Oh, thank you for having me,
and
Alex.
good luck with the rest of your improv adventures, and if I do any performance stuff myself, I'll let you know,
Oh,
and
good.
maybe we
Yes.
can collaborate at some point.
I would love to. That would make me very happy.
Amazing, thank you.
Great. Thank you.